So Ibad, welcome to Jugnu Junction, and thank you for taking out the time to come in.
नहीं यार Yasir, it's a great opportunity and very happy and grateful to be here.
I think there's a lot happening in this startup world lately, and there's a lot of amazing progress that the startup scene has made in Pakistan, and it would be wonderful to be talking about that with you today. We can start off with getting to have the audience know you a little bit more. So if you can have a little bit of a story about yourself.
Sure, I think it would be good to have a bit of personal and professional both. So as a person, I'm an only child. I grew up in Karachi for 27 years, and then I went to GIK for my engineering. That was back in 2008. Came back, did a bit of instrumentation and controls as my first job with Engro. Most people don't know about that. Spent a bit of time with Shell, around 5 years. Important formative professional experience came from there. After that, I went to NCR for my MBA. MBA करने के बाद, and this is why that only child thing kind of ties in very well. My father was working in Saudi Arabia at that time, so this was kind of one of the main reasons I went back to Saudi Arabia. Worked there with a big family business, and after 6 years I have come back to Pakistan in March of 2020. Came back and worked for Spar a bit as their chief operating officer before I got reached out to by foodpanda to start their groceries vertical. So essentially the journey has been interesting because it has gone from very traditional industries and oil and gas and automotive and eventually into retail. But then from retail, I think this inflection to tech has been probably one of the most interesting parts of my career.
So, like, how did you start with engineering and actually end up doing commerce and now what we call actually quick commerce?
Yeah, well, engineering was probably how, at least back in the day, it used to be. Look at who's done well, in and around your circles. I think a very important skill sets that you learn as an engineer, always trying to use data as a base of decision making rather than general gut feel and instinct. I think that's something that engineers typically are very good at. That let's talk about the hard facts and then go from there. And वो बड़ा important skill set engineering से learn किया. दूसरा, I think probably detail orientation. That sometimes while it's important to zoom out and be strategic, but the beauty lies in the details, the operational execution. So I think that part of engineering has really helped me in my career.
So we have foodpanda over here, which went through the entire design of creating a parallel organization, the go-to restaurant app, which would deliver food to everyone's house. All of a sudden comes up in a new vertical, just as COVID enters, and did so well, at least in the places we see around us. Can you tell us a little bit about this story, how it all happened, and was this really something that is sustainable going forward?
We'll have to slightly go one leg up because obviously foodpanda has a lot of strengths. One of the key strengths of Delivery Hero, our mothership, is that a lot of decision making is still decentralized. I think this is one very important learning, at least for me, when I compare ourselves with certain other large organizations on what it takes to continue being successful. Centrally, when people are sitting, probably they can really add value in terms of technology, in terms of knowledge transfer, but other than that, really understanding how the local market works and feels that's really has to come bottom up. There's this great professor at Stanford, Huggy Rao is his short form. He's Hayagriva, but everyone calls him Huggy. And he says that the essence of any great company is the mixture between Catholicism and Buddhism. And what he meant was that if you look at all the great Abrahamic religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they give you certain commandments and that enforcement is a bit centralized, top down. And then when you look at some of these Buddhist religions, etc., then it's a lot about decentralization in terms of local nuances mattering, and then you using some of those local nuances to scale back up. So what I like what he said, that it's not just one of the two. You have to marry both these so that you know that from this part, the Catholicism part probably, you can do what is replication, you know, the what it matters in scale. What are the kind of competences that we can just do Control C, Control V and paste in another place. But if I'm going to another geography, if I'm going into a new market altogether and I don't understand those local nuances, I won't be successful. If it were that easy, Control C, Control V, it wouldn't really work. So it has to be that marriage. So when somebody asks me, yeah, what really is your, if I ask you the company's core competence, that has to be logistics. That somehow the company has been able to master the art of two-wheeler delivery.
It's just beautiful how foodpanda has, of course, been able to carry this thought of, you know, think global and act local. As through the example which you gave, the management lessons we can derive from, you know, different religions and see how we can really put those management lessons together. But at the same time, what you just mentioned in terms of, I'm really amused by the fact that how foodpanda has been able to create a common set of resources. Can you talk a little bit about and explain us a little bit about how foodpanda or, you know, other startups can actually benefit from being able to create these common set of resources, and how can organizations and see how to utilize these to better the advantages on either growth or profit or both. It was able to leapfrog the evolution of the HR function, the evolution of the finance function, the evolution of the technology function, and just be ready, be about a year or 2 years ahead of everyone else, because those functions were taken care of, logistics itself was taken care of, and when quick commerce was to be launched, it was completely just about pushing the button and just learning on the commerce bit.
So I think it's a little more nuanced than that, because obviously if I were to say in retrospect everything was perfect, clearly that wasn't the case. There were learning curves. So that learning is there to see that, you know, failure is okay. When you start something, how to craft the least cost pilot so that if, God forbid, it fails, the damage is not too painful. When I look at us and when somebody asks me what you see as one of the differences, especially if I talk about quick commerce specifically, is I say we never went for experienced resources from the market only or young energetic hustlers only. We were able to build that marriage because we always felt, at least I felt as a leadership team, that if we went purely for expertise, we would not have that requisite passion and energy to build something new, to break barriers about how things should be done based on some preconceived notion of मैं पिछले 14 साल से ये करता आया हूँ. So you know, it's you have to have a very you know, that slate needs to be cleaned, wiped off clean, and then restarted.
Ibad, as you know that, you know, there's a storm right around the corner and times are changing very rapidly. The slate is being now wiped clean for the economy in a lot of ways. So really a lot of testing times coming up. How do you see this, you know, new season of, you know, the entire startup world coming up, a new flavor for the season really coming in? How does this really impact foodpanda, or let's say the quick commerce space? We've seen some, you know, a lot of information actually coming in lately from the segment. And how should the startups really start preparing for this moving forward?
Yasir, that's a great question. But what I would like to say is that sometimes it's old stories and lessons getting repeated, because apparently human memory seems to be quite short. For example, e-grocery startup studies that came from the 97-98 period during the first .com bust, a bubble and then bust. And the similarities are remarkably stark. So going back to your question, I think it's a bit saddening because like we were having an informal catch up and we were talking about how business models should be designed. I think it's imperative that businesses are built in a way that they can both thrive in booms and survive busts. Unfortunately, the focus sometimes is a bit too much on the former rather than thinking about the latter until it has already happened. And that's what we see a bit of. I think it's also saddening because what it means for Pakistan as a country is something probably only time will tell. How, for example, foreign investors look at us as a place to continue investing more, and I hope that they see this also as a part of a cycle, not some kind of country-specific phenomenon. But amidst the gray, it's a delicate dance. And the delicate dance is how much growth to gun for, then know when to kind of, take off the juice or the addiction, and then prime yourself for profitability. Because at the end of the day, every successful business would have at least made sure that it is not bleeding on a per transaction level. So if its contribution margin is not covering its variable costs and it's still scaling up fast, then there's something really wrong.
How many startups do you think are really working on this particular end at the moment? And from just taking a perspective on Pakistan specifically, for the times to come, what I understand is from the three areas which you mentioned, the third one is where most of us have to be focusing on. How ready is the industry? What does the industry really need to do for this?
That's a bit difficult. I think I'm not in the exact shoes of those people right now. But I loved what you said, that the problem is when you don't choose the timing of becoming operationally efficient, of getting your fundamentals right, when the market chooses that for you, that basically means probably it's too late. If the market circumstances changing is when you decide now we need to think about profitability at all costs, then it's probably a little too late.
So Ibad, we always just go through this in hindsight. सारी की सारी learnings हैं. जब भी कहते हैं कि this happened in 2008, this happened in 2001, and we will probably remember this. I know this happened in 2022 as well, or in the COVID crisis. So it's always about looking at it in hindsight. What can we do to get people to understand कि भाई ये fundamentals हैं, this is what we have to carry forward with? What actions would you suggest to all the founders out there, all the startups out there?
Two things which come to my mind are, number one, read history. Like for a start, when anybody comes up to me with an idea and says, for example, maybe as an angel, would you like to invest? And I have this really novel idea that no one has thought of before. The first question I say is, are you really sure nobody has thought of this before? The chances of someone not having thought of an idea is very low. So the first thing is always to go back in history and see, have other people done what I have done before? What did they get right? What did they get wrong? What was going on? The second probably is somewhat difficult, which is a bit more about aligning the right incentives. I think that the way the capital markets, I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately work, they have a lot of benefits, but I think the way VC has been structured, probably it's a little more short term than we'd like it to be. So when you're just thinking round to round, then probably it depends a lot on the grit, the resilience, as well as the vision and the passion of the founder to really hold their ground.
Do you think from a Pakistan perspective, given that the global crisis is, of course, hitting all countries alike, but Pakistan is also going through a little bit of a tough time from weakening of its economy. Anything specifically the Pakistani founders need to be more watchful for?
I think go back to the fundamentals, really build that path to profitability and have those timelines in place. You need to know how you're going to achieve that, and you also need to know by when you need to achieve specific milestones. So I think there's also a lot of learning here. I think one of the things that we see is, how do you get that unicorn status, right? Like how can you get that? And it always boils down to, this is a great country from a demographics perspective just because of population. But Pakistan will always be a low basket size country. I don't see that changing anytime soon when you'll compare to the dollar or the euro or whatever value perspective. So when you want to go for GMV, it will be about, can we replicate this model in other countries? Now this means a lot of things are going on. When that starts happening, which is great, and I would love, if more and more Pakistani companies went out into other countries. But then you also need to start thinking and becoming global. Then you cannot just be a Pakistani company. What does that mean in terms of talent? What does that mean in terms of the leadership levels that you have? How will you bring that diversity of thought? How would you go back to that thing which I discussed, Catholicism and Buddhism? Maybe the Catholicism is going to come from what you learned in Pakistan, but you'll have to encompass that local element from the market, ground up, so that you're successful in that market as well and you can replicate. So scale is about all that marriage.
So thank you so much, Ibad, for really being with us. I think it was an immense learning opportunity for myself, and I'm sure for the audience as well. Thank you so much.